Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining. My name is Eli Valentin II, and I'm honored to serve as the chairman of the Greenville County Democratic Party. On behalf of our entire leadership team, our vice chairs, our executive committee members, and all of the volunteers that support our movement each and every day, we want to welcome you and thank you for your time and participation in our second Thursday conversations. This is a new component of the GCDP. Each month, our goal is to bring you conversations on topics to shine a light on issues and spaces in politics which often don't receive the attention and care they deserve. This evening, this topic is so powerful and so important, and I'm ready to get to it. We're discussing with this fantastic group of individuals who have committed themselves and their lives to giving back to the community what it's like to be a Black man today. We're matching this February installment with our movement to honor Black History Month. It is so important and so vital to realize that we should be celebrating Black history every day of the year. But in February, it has been designated and honored, and we at the GCDP wanted to highlight in a variety of ways the multitude of contributions in the past, in the present, and in the future that our Black community has given us. So I am so excited to get this going, and I want to introduce our panelists. Our panelists are going to share their stories with you later on, but I'm going to give you a quick and brief introduction of who they are and a little overview, and then you're going to get to hear from them in their own words a little bit later in the program. Again, I want to thank you for being a Black man today, and we're going to get going with this program. Our first amazing panelist is our third vice chair, Jonathon Sweeney. Jonathon serves as the third vice chair currently, elected in 2020, and he's the former president of the Young Democrats of Greenville County, or YGDC, reconstituting the chapter after years and years of dormancy. Jonathon brought life back to that program, and now it's a vibrant Democratic group with youth and energy. Jonathon is a community servant, proud of his faith, and a respected professional in the banking and financial service industries. It is always a pleasure to be in your company, Vice Chairman Sweeney. Thank you so much for joining us. Our next panelist is Kwadjo Campbell. Kwadjo is an educator, campaign strategist, and currently serves as the chairman of the Democratic Black Caucus of Greenville County. He served as the state director for Bernie 2020 and has been the leader of numerous electoral victories. And I think that's the difference. They're victories for Democrats across the state. His passion for educating the next generation is truly something special to watch. Thank you so much, Chairman Campbell. I always enjoy our time together. Our next panelist is Javaris Howard. Javaris is a business and community leader and a proud combat veteran. He serves in the South Carolina National Guard and has stepped up for our community in so many different ways. Whether it's sitting on impactful community boards, such as the Greenville Area Development Corporation, or running as a local candidate, because local elections matter and are so important, Javaris is always willing to lend a hand, always having that amazing smile on his face, and always willing to do the hard work. I want to thank you, Mr. Howard, for always stepping up and for your dedication to our community. Our last but not least panelist is Derrick Quarrels. Derrick is no stranger to politics, as he served in numerous senior roles on high-level campaigns, from president to Congress to our state Senate. He's completing a PhD from Jackson State University and has been a passionate educator, especially in the space of HBCU education. Derrick is the founder of the Upstate Black Lives Matter chapter. He was a unifying and instrumental figure in the peaceful protests here in Greenville this past summer. I'm so excited to have you on, Derrick, and thank you for joining us. We're gonna hear from each of our panelists in their own words. So this segment we're calling Your Greenville Story. And we're gonna have each of our panelists share their Greenville story, their origin story, how they came to Greenville, but most importantly, what it's like to be a Black man today. So without further ado, I want to start with our excellent third vice chair, Jonathon Sweeney. Tell us your Greenville story.
Thank you, Eli. And before I start, I do want to just give kudos to Eli, our incredible chair, and also kudos to Laura Height, our communications director, they both put all this together. And so without them, we wouldn't be on this panel. So thank you both. And thank everyone for joining us. That's a loaded question, Eli. What it is like to be a Black man today, and especially just to share my story. But I would say, as many of you know, born and raised here in Greenville, South Carolina. So this is home. I went off to college after matriculating through grade school. I went to Elon University in North Carolina and got a bachelor's degree there in political science. But like I said, Greenville was home. So after a short stint away, working on a political campaign, I returned back to Greenville and shortly thereafter began working in the financial services industry and have been in it ever since. And so it's been an interesting timeline to see what Greenville has turned into, and especially as a Black man. I would just say that there's been so much growth, so much change in Greenville, since I grew up. I remember, my parents were always involved in activism, and so I've always been around that, and thus I'm here today. But we were always marching. We were always going to some meetings. I actually started out my activism in the NAACP youth chapter here in Greenville, and so it's truly, in my blood. I still remember when we marched on the bridge, the Church Street Bridge there, marching for Greenville County to recognize Dr. King's, holiday here finally. As many know, if you are from here, you know that Greenville County is said to be the last county in the country to have honored that with a paid holiday for county officials. And so, it's been in my blood ever since. And I'm just appreciative to my parents, my family. A lot of them are on this evening, and so I thank them for the journey that I've had. And obviously, I wouldn't be here without them. And even the Democratic Party itself has been instrumental in effectuating change. I would just say that my experience as an African American man growing up, I didn't grow up with a silver spoon in my mouth. I also I never missed a meal. And so, I'm somewhere in the middle there. But, there was always something that we knew as a people that we had to strive for and that we had to struggle towards and get towards. And so, my story is not unlike many other African American men here. It's just, by the grace of God and, with strong leaders in my family and in the community, I was able to successfully, grow from boyhood into manhood. And so, I'm ready to help Black men in Greenville get to the next step.
Well, thank you for that perspective, Jonathon. And I know I share this with you often. You are doing it. It's not that you're trying to do it. You are affecting that change and being that bridge. So I appreciate that perspective and the work that you're doing. I'd love to open it up to Mr. Quarrels. Derrick, if you'd like to share your Greenville story.
Yes, good evening, and to Eli and to the entire panel. Thank you all so much for putting this together. I have Invisaligns in now, so it's not like I have a list. It's because I'm getting used to my Invisaligns. So my Greenville story is similar to Jonathon's, in that we never struggled, but we also were not in a plate of elitism. But with my story, because I've lived all over Greenville County. I've lived in Travelers Rest. I've lived in Malden, and so I've seen and I went to school at Southside. I also went to school in Travelers Rest, And so being a young person growing up in Travelers Rest, and being exposed to racism firsthand, in middle school, being called the N-word on the bus by, white kids who didn't know any better. They were just repeating what they heard their parents say. And then, going from the school bus to the actual school, and then having teachers not necessarily say the N-word, but treating you as if you were an N-word, not really giving you that extra encouragement, that extra push, or that extra attention that you needed as a child, and oftentimes suspending students like myself because I wanted that same attention that the white students were getting. I wanted the same affection and the same response from my teachers, and I wouldn't get it, and so I would just respond how I felt appropriate. But as time went on, I learned to channel that energy into doing something. I don't want to say positive, but doing something different. And so while people now look at me and think that I'm I'm doing all these phenomenal things, it's really me just making up for the stuff that I did as a child. Because I was a hellish young person. I'll tell you about it one day, but I'll just tell you this: I'm not an angel, and part of me going into activism is because, again, I've been on the other side. I've been on the side where been on probation. I've been arrested, and I used to be ashamed of my story, and I used to be ashamed of my past. But my story and my past is what shaped me and what's made me the person I am today. And so now when I go and advocate for people that are locked up, or for people that are on probation, or people that are on supervision, I can go to whoever I need to and say, speaking from experience, this is what needs to happen, or this is what should happen. And so, and so I'm now at a place in my life where I'm still trying to get myself together, still trying to figure out what I'm supposed to be doing in life. But yeah, I mean, it's been a whirlwind. It's been a roller coaster, and I'm still on this path of discovering what it means to be a Black man in America and in Greenville, particularly because Greenville was home for me. And so that's my story.
And one point of privilege, Derrick has been involved in the educational movement and really promoting HBCUs and the power that HBCUs can bring in people's lives. But one thing I'm so proud of is we stole Derrick back. Derrick was in Texas for a long time, and I just want to say how great it is to have him home. We are very lucky to have you back, bud.
Well, that's the reason I actually came back. So yeah, I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'd love to open it up to Mr. Howard. Javaris, if you'd share your Greenville story.
Yeah, absolutely. So same. First, want to give it back to you, Eli, Ms. Laura. Incredible job. I'm super excited to be a part of the GCDP family. And, this is really what it's all about, to all the panelists and everyone watching. My Greenville story is similar. Let's see, I arrived in Greenville probably around 8 years old or so. I did went to Hughes for a little while, did some Southside time, Mr. Derrick there. Let's see, and then I left and went and graduated high school in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Then joined the military and eventually found my way back here. The Greenville I left is definitely not the Greenville it is today. I can tell you that. I can tell you some of the things that are exciting about Greenville and what just continues to push me here in Greenville is the history of it. I like the things that Greenville has done to change. This is something that we'll be able to, tell our kids and future generations forever. Now, it also has a call to action in there to make sure that change allows us to preserve that history and talk about what it means to be Black in the midst of that history happening here in Greenville, South Carolina. I think here I operate in small business and keep my hands in the real estate realm. And it really just gives me a good outlook on how the economy is doing. In a sense, it also lets me see some of the disparities between people of color. And also it allows me to channel in some opportunities and, connect with some of you extremely smart people that are on this panel to make sure that we keep our communities connected with those opportunities and allow them to thrive. So I see a lot of opportunity here in Greenville. I'm glad and hope to continue to be a part of it. And I grew up, my father was an airplane mechanic right there in Donaldson Center between Stevens Aviation, Lockheed Martin. My mom's was always in education. My grandmother is still in charge of transportation down in Fayetteville, North Carolina. So humble beginnings for sure. But I was always eager, participating in speech and debate and forensics. I even played the violin. Not a lot of people know that. But I always wanted that feeling of doing something different and trying to make a difference. I think the military really helped me kind of, focus and put that vision into play to come back here and to see it kind of grow. It's been amazing. So thank you again for the opportunity. I'm excited about tonight.
Thank you so much, Tavares, for your leadership and for your service. I want to end this round with our educator on the panel, Kwadjo Campbell, our chairman of the Democratic Black Caucus of Greenville, South Carolina.
Right. Hey, peace, everybody. Tavares is also second vice chair for the Democratic Black Caucus. It's an honor to be on this panel with you guys. I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you, Brother Sweeney, and working with you, but I hope to work with you in the future. Unlike everybody else, I am not from Greenville. I am from a small little town called Charleston, South Carolina, down in the lower part of the state. And, it's many same experiences, raised between my mom and my grandmother. My mom was single parent, and we did some moving, different places around the country. So I got a bunch of different perspectives. But, my journey to becoming what I do and all of what I do, I am an educator. I got to Greenville because my wife wanted to move back closer to home when we were living in Virginia. And we had our daughter, our youngest daughter. And so she wanted to be closer to home, and she went to Clemson, and I came down here, and I ended up going to Clemson to get my master's in education, jumped in education. But I had been on city council for 8 years in the city of Charleston. And so I had done a lot of work in planning and economic development. And so that still was in my blood. So I still dipped and dabbled with that and built my little company, JC and Associates. And, that has grown. And primarily what we do is economic development. Our mantra is that we are seeking to build self-sustainable communities in our neighborhoods. That's our goal. And so all the work that I do, from working with in education, working with African-American tourism, working with affordable housing, is all in the vein of helping our community become self-sustainable. That's our goal. That's our objective. So I'm excited to discuss, the issues here tonight. Just real touch on the thing of being a Black man in this country. We are constantly under attack as Black men. Our community is constantly under attack. We don't, consciously, think about it all the time, but that's the issue. Whether we're on our jobs, whether we're in social settings, it's being bared out across America how we're attacking. Those are just like profound, outrageous instances. We each know that every day we deal with instances where we're under the microscope. But, at the same time, I have a lot of great experiences as a Black man as well. I work with a lot of good Black men. I was raised by a lot of good, strong Black men. I have a lot of good Black male role models. And I just want to do that for the next generation. I think that's what we're missing in our community as Black men, is that there's not enough of us coming together to provide that next generation the role models they need to be successful. I'm a member of Call Me Mr., which is an educational program at Clemson. And, universities around the state and around the country that recruits Black men to not just teach, but to be mentors, because that's what our kids desperately need. I see young men every day, with no motivation, all right? But then when you dig deeper, you find out that, the story is, the story. We know the stories, right? Fathers, um, around, not around, locked up, not locked up, dealing with the system. Mothers is dealing with jobs, multiple kids and dealing with the issues, so these young men are, these young boys, are going to be future young men in our community with those scars, with that trauma. And the cycle just continues and continues. And while they're going through that trauma, they have to deal with the society that has targeted them, that has misaligned them, that has underrepresented them, has under-resourced them. And so it is our job as Black men, if there's anything that I want to press on tonight as we discuss, is what is our responsibility to Black men, as we are all Black men doing our thing for our communities and for our families. What is our responsibility to the next generation of Black men?
Kwadjo, I really appreciate that powerful message. And it's a great way to segue into our challenges and opportunities segment. So we're going to kick around some questions, and it's going to be an open dialogue with our panelists so that they can glean some insight on a variety of topics. So I'm going to start with Javaris. And it's kind of a little bit of what you're working with and Kwadjo mentioned. Describe the economic opportunities and challenges facing Black men in the workforce today. We know that pay disparity is one of them, but share with us some of the insight that you have with your background and knowledge.
I think some of the, disparities can be taken head on, actually. I think one of the key things Mr. Kwadjo mentioned, and, I'd like to say great minds think alike, but I understand I'm speaking about a highly esteemed gentleman there. But I would try to take from that that I feel like those disparities can easily be attacked head on with educating our youth, making sure they understand what those opportunities are, what's available to them, how to gain access to them, providing the resources that they need to do that. We are already valuable in being a Black man, right? We do have histories, where we all have different backgrounds. Some of us have, great stories. Some of us have tougher stories, but they were all lessons that help form and develop us. And so, once we know that regardless of some of those scars that we're faced with, when we enter that workforce, or we want to enter that workforce, we know what resources are available to make sure that the company can see our value, right? We want to make sure that they understand our value amongst the workforce or whatever within that organization. I feel like it all kind of boils down to, what type of mentorship is there. The resources being available and not having access to them, or not knowing how to get to those resources or get them back to the community, that adds to the problem. So we need that. We need liaison Black men, right? We need liaison Black women to that went through some of those same struggles. They gained access to the things that they need. And then we turn that right back around and we pass that to our communities. When we do that, we help develop from within, and it helps us break those generational curses. And instead, it helps us to raise those generational and legacy makers. So that's my add on to that.
Great. I really appreciate that. And Jonathon, I know your educational experience shaped who you are today. You kind of brought that up a little bit in your opening. What are some of the challenges and barriers that you think young Black men face when thinking or planning for higher education?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. I think just like anything that is to be undertaken in this world, usually one of the first barriers that you think about is money, finances. And that's with anything, education, whatever, transportation. And so when you talk about education and you talk about potential barriers for Black men, that's what you look at. Sometimes you have Black men that are coming out of or young Black men, I should say, coming out of maybe single parent homes. Maybe they've been raised by grandparents, who obviously are in their twilight years. So, that earning power and potential is maybe not there. So finances and resources may be slim. A lot of times, unless you have a teacher, and a lot of times that looks like them, or a guidance counselor that looks like them, or that pulls them to the side and says, hey, have you ever thought about this? There may not be that guidance there. And so that's one of the things that I think about as an initial barrier, is the finance part of it. But then, like I said, just resources in general. I was blessed enough to have educators that, it wasn't just a job for them. They knew it was a calling. It was something that was a lifestyle. Throughout elementary, middle, and high school, I always had those educators there, and not just those that looked like me, but others as well that saw things in me, and other students, that were my peers, and they pushed us to be the best version of ourselves. And so I think that for those that sometimes struggle, they may not have those situations, and then their home life may not be conducive to the things that would behoove someone to matriculate and go on into higher education. If there's abuse in the home, if there's some type of contention there, that's distracting the child from focusing on education. There's food insecurity. Obviously, you're hungry. The last thing in your mind is learning about what's in that textbook. You want something to eat. And so I think that this area, this state, and this country can do a much better job there. And I know the government can't fix everybody's problems, and I'm not saying that it is there to do so, but I think that there can be much more done than is being done now, to facilitate all of our youth, if they so choose, to go on to higher education. And so I would say for me, my story, like I said, I had guidance counselors, I had obviously parents, family, that I didn't have a choice. It wasn't if you're going to college, it's where and when. And so it was one of those things where, I'm appreciative of that tough love that Kwadjo mentioned earlier. That's sometimes missing in our communities. And it's not that we need to point the blame or who or what, whatever, but we all just collectively need to come together and say, hey, it takes a village. That whole mentality, it truly takes a village, because I didn't get to where I am just because of my parents or my family or whoever. It was literally the whole community, and even the hardships, they shaped me into who I am, and obviously that goes into education as well. And so that would be my answer to that question, Eli.
Well, thank you. Jonathon, I just want to follow up with something that you talked about. And when you and I talked offline, I want you to share the story about intentionality that you said, and good job, Mama Scott and Dad Scott, with pushing Jonathon and being hard. But you told us about the intentionality when they selected a dentist or a doctor. And one of the things I just want to highlight to folks, in my experience with working with Senator Harris, when she was on the campaign trail running for president, she would often say this stat that would just blow my mind. And it was from Johns Hopkins and American University, finds that if a Black student has one Black teacher by the time they're in third grade, they're 13% more likely to enroll in college. Those that had two Black teachers by the time they were in third grade were 32% more likely to enroll in college. So Jonathon, talk about that representation matters, or seeing yourself in those professional fields, because I know you and I talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up. It almost slipped my mind. That's huge. You hit the nail right on the head. Intentionality matters. Representation matters. I think that's why so many folks in our community, and Eli, how we feel about then Senator Harris, now Vice President Kamala Harris. But that's why that stuff matters. Now, young Black girls can look and say, you know what, I can do that. And it's not that they've not been able to do it before, but something about seeing you in someone else makes the biggest difference sometimes. And so, to go to your point, the thing for me was that, I saw educators. I had black male educators in middle school and high school, all throughout elementary school. 2 or 3 different black educators, and so that made a difference to me. But to your point of the doctors and dentists and those things, we talked offline a while back, and we just got into it, and I really didn't think about it when I said it, but I'm glad that you brought it up. But all of my primary care physicians as a child were African American. All of them were black. So my dentist was black. My pediatrician was black. My optometrist was black. And I never thought about it at the time. Never, as a child, you're not thinking about that. But as I grew into a young man and then a man into adulthood, I thought back on that, and I realized how rare that is for folks that look like us to have that experience. And I can't tell you how much pride it gave me, and it was important to me, obviously to my parents for that to be the case. And I don't think it was by happenstance that I had those folks, caring for me. And it was just the biggest thing. And so from seeing Dr. Wittenberg and from seeing Dr. Wood and Dr. Hall, those things were important to me because, when we talk about things like the COVID-19 pandemic that we're in now, we talk about the vaccinations and that whole discussion. That's why it's important to see folks like Dr. Corbett, there providing that insight and being a part of the trials and the research to come up with these vaccines, because we've been seeing on TV how there's so much mistrust and misguidance, and obviously with the previous administration there was so much misinformation. It's important to see folks that look like us so that we're able to trust it, because we know that the country unfortunately has a history of treating Black folks poorly, and so it's important to see folks that look like us so that way we can have that trust in our community.
Thank you so much, Jonathon. I really appreciate that. Derrick, I know you've been intricately involved in the social justice movement before Black Lives Matter was even popular in the lexicon in the United States. It was something that you've been championing, that you've been consistent on, but now there's a rise in consciousness. But what we do is that we need to lead that consciousness to action. So community safety and policing within the African American community are being discussed, but they're not actually being addressed. From your perspective, what are some first steps that you would recommend that you can do and share with us, or that we can do as individual Greenville citizens?
Great question. So one of the things I would do first, something I've always done, is read and do the research. Whenever you want to have a conversation about whether it's police brutality, or whether you're talking about police hiring and recruitment practices, you always want to make sure that you're speaking from as much factual evidence as you can when you're having these conversations. So back in 2012, I think it was, I had a conversation with several different police chiefs. It was just myself and them having one-on-one conversations. Number one, to build a relationship so that we could work together. But number two, I wanted to know what their practices were and what their in terms of hiring Black people and other minorities. And at the time, there was a police chief in Simpsonville named Keith. I can't remember his last name, but anyways, he was chief of police in Simpsonville, and we had met for maybe about 3 or 4 months, and I realized that he was a genuine and sincere person, and that he was serious about wanting to hire other minorities. And so I called his bluff, and I said, well, I have 2 candidates that I've talked to who are, one former military, the other one is law enforcement trained already, and they're ready to start working whenever you give them the interview. And he interviewed both of them. Well, his department interviewed both of them and hired both of them, within 2 weeks. And so it was at that point when I knew that he was serious about, wanting to be inclusive and wanting to have a diverse police department, because at the time they didn't have anybody Black, and that was in 2000. Well, they had one Black person who was a lieutenant, but yeah. Anyways, and so from that, I tried to have a conversation with other police chiefs and even the sheriff about what were their practices and that kind of thing. And I really didn't make a lot of headway because, when you get to those roles, those C-suite roles, you feel like as if you know everything, especially when you're in law enforcement. And that's the kind of attitude I got from most of those guys. But, continue past that. What I would say is, and I mentioned that to say this is that you always want to make sure that you're having conversations with folks and being intentional about the conversations, and always like having a reason behind the work that you're doing. And so my reason behind, building those relationships, one of the reasons was because, again, I want to make sure that we have, Black and brown folks and more women working in law enforcement. But in addition to that, just, building those relationships, having at least one or two folks, that you can, rely on, because let's be honest, like, we don't trust the police, and that's across the board. That's not just Black folks. It's a lot of folks don't trust the police. And it's because the police they've earned that also they've earned that lack of trust and a lack of accountability. And Greenville particularly, they have on their police cars, it says community, something and something. It's three words. And the one that stuck out to me that I remember is community. And I remember it because, in my opinion, like, they don't really care about the community that I care about. They care about one community, and that's that's the affluent community, and it's obvious when you look at the crime rate, when you look at the response time to 911 calls. So let me just get back onto what I was going to say. So just making sure that we have those relationships, making sure that we are intentional when we have those relationships, and making sure that we hold folks accountable, because a lot of times people get into those roles and they get, especially when they're elected, and they feel as if they have the power to rule with an iron fist, and that's not the reality. The reality is the people, especially the folks who elect, if you're elected, we rule with an iron fist, and we get to decide who represents us. And I always tell people, like, the sheriff is probably the single most important election in any county because of the power that a sheriff has. And then the chief of police, they too have an absorbent amount of power. And so having conversations and relationships with those folks is very important. And again, as you mentioned, I've been doing this social justice work way before BLM and way before it was a popular thing to do. And that's because, again, I've seen the other side. I've seen folks who are struggling, folks who went from high school, not even graduating high school, and then going straight into, selling drugs, being sex workers. And it's people that didn't necessarily want to live those lifestyles, but because of the environment that they were raised and exposed to as adolescents, that's who they became. And so just knowing that my passion and my zeal, the difference of my passion and my zeal, well, I won't say the difference. I'll say, because a few months ago, one of my good friends who lives in Bellmead, we've been friends for a very long time. His father passed away. I went over to the house, and I saw 10 or so people that I hadn't seen since high school, people that I rocked with, like, and they remember me back when I was, like, who I was back then. And they were like, man, we ain't seen you in so long. And like, we thought you changed, because you do this, you're doing that. And I'm like, bro, like, I'm the same person I was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. The only difference now is that I got a little more education and I got a little more skill set. And so I'm able to go into those spaces where they don't go, not that they can't go, but where they aren't really invited into, again, to have those conversations, so that people that are stuck in the hood still have sort of a voice. So I guess my role in social justice is to be a voice for folks who don't know how to use that voice, because all of us have a voice. It's just a matter of using it, for the right reason.
Do you feel like your education background has helped you been able to articulate that, especially to the younger generation who might not themselves have been victims of police brutality, but know that that's a real threat and have older siblings or older cousins or older friends that have gone through that? How do you feel like your education is helping inform you in this movement?
So the education definitely, in my personal opinion, has helped me in terms of like being able to have an intellectual conversation and being able to speak, again, factually, and say, if somebody tells me that there are more Black people that were killed by law enforcement last year than white people, I'm going to go and fact check them, and we're going to have a conversation about, you know, whatever it is that we're talking about. But in terms of like just, you know, the day-to-day normal stuff, like my education really hasn't helped at all in this, again, that's my opinion, in this arena. Because a lot of times, again, folks don't, you know, education doesn't matter if you're dead. It doesn't matter if you are the subject of an investigation in which you haven't even done anything. Education doesn't matter, you know, when you are faced with realities that that are less like pleasant, you know. And so for me, wanting to achieve, you know, the education and being on this path that I've been on, it's a personal thing for me. And it's me proving to myself that I can be what I desire to be. I've always wanted to be a doctor. I just didn't know like what kind of doctor. I thought I was going to be a medical doctor. And so I'm not going to the medical field. But, you know, I was talking to the sheriff in Columbia about a month or so ago, and he said, when you finish your doctorate, do I have to call you doctor? And I said, yes, you do, one time. And I said, after that, you know, my name is Derrick. So just, you know, that's how you know me. But so I would never, you know, like wear my title on my shoulder. Again, yeah. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Perfect. I appreciate that. Mr. Campbell, Chairman Campbell, you are very passionate and very intricately involved in understanding and helping to make sense of, and it's not really, there isn't any sense to make of it, the Greenville transportation system. A lot of times it doesn't always serve the Black community, nor has it kept this important dialogue open with the community. So talk about some of the challenges and barriers that you see the transportation system places on Black men, specifically in Greenville.
Well, you know, transportation is a key connector to, you know, jobs, economic development for people who do not have modes of transportation. So making sure that we have routes that go to major job centers, having those partnerships, making sure that public transportation is being funded, making sure that we have a plan in place for some type of mass transit, maybe a light rail system to move around the region to take people to major manufacturing jobs in the area, that type of thing. But to make that happen, Black men have got to exercise their power, and that's maybe something else that we can get back into. Brother Sweeney said earlier that we don't see he doesn't see the government having all the responsibility, but he does see them having, you know, some responsibility. We taxpayers, right? And so we've got to use as Black men our power to make sure that our vote is pushing for these type of policies to happen. All right, Black men have if we just look at the voter turnout in Greenville County recently, Black men are the lowest participant in the local electorate. Yet we catch the most hell. There's a correlation, right? And so if we come together and band together and use our power, we can make some things happen, not just for that, but we can get some job training and placement programs funded and placed and partnerships with Greenville Tech. Greenville Tech's a willing participant. You know, there are a number of nonprofits in the community willing participant, but the resources haven't been allocated in those directions. Black men, we got to use our power, right? Criminal justice reform. We're talking about police departments. You know, some make serious commitments, like Brother Derrick is saying. Some, you know, totally ignore us, right? It's because they don't fear us, right? And you know, so they can beat us across the head. They can stop us indiscriminately. They can, you know, do whatever they want to do because Black men, we're not using our power, right? When we talk about economic development, right? PPP is disproportionately impact, you know, coming into our community. When you talk about the other resources that are supposed to be coming into our community, it's not happening. Right, so we're disproportionately being impacted by COVID, et cetera, but we haven't been using our power. Black men use our power. to make these things happen.
Well, Kwadjo, one of the things that I'm going to brag on you a little bit, I think is one of your true gifts is your ability to organize naturally. You're a natural organizer. I know your title is no longer organizer because it's low on the food chain, but I think you do such a great job of bringing people together around issues. So talk to me, to your point, how can the four of you all that are on this panel help together to organize our community, to build that political power, to build that if you don't pay attention to us, there's going to be repercussions on the back end. How can you share with us some of that and the work that you're doing with the Black Caucus?
I think some of it is happening organically as we begin to fill these positions of power, right? Look right now. We've got on this panel, two of the men who are on this panel are leaders in the Democratic Party, right? Chairman, and who's doing a hell of a job, bro. You know what I mean? You're doing a great job as the chairman. And so Brother Sweeney, with his talents and business and economic development and his connection to community, right? We discount what social capital can do to enhance our movement. And we a lot of times don't connect our social capital to our political organizing movements, all right? Because if we do that, we can convince our family, our friends, our networks, right? Because they believe in us, right? And if we can move them to action, I think some of this is happening already organically. I'd like to be more proactive in being involved with what Brother Derrick is doing, right? I think we can, as the Black Caucus, lend our resources, our network, our spheres of influence to what that young brother is doing and his network is doing. Same with the Democratic Party and anybody else that is listening that is down with what we're talking about for Black men, because Derrick organization is the organization that is representing young Black men out here. You know what I mean? So whatever we could do, Derrick, to plug you into what we've got going on and for you to plug us into what you've got going on, let's make it happen.
And Javaris, you and Kwadjo both hit on something that I think is so vital, the power and need for mentorship. And I know you and I talked offline about this. So share with me a little bit of your development in mentorship and why you believe that's such an important piece.
Well, I think, I don't remember if it was Brother Sweeney or Brother Derrick that talked about having mentors within our community or within the school system. That was vital for me, having family members that were educators, seeing other teachers that looked like me, right, that had stories similar to mine, for me to be able to relate to, right. It helped in discipline. All right. So making sure that, they would share their stories that were very similar to how my discipline went at home. And it instilled that understanding and, I guess, for lack of better words, that fear and knowing that, you weren't going to pull anything over this teacher. Right. Because they knew your mom. Right. They know your dad and they know where you come from. And I think that's the same type of mentorship and guidance and discipline that we need to see in our communities. So when it comes to, again, just, finishing that example, I had a lot of great mentors that were educators. Outside of that, we had an officer that was assigned to our community when I was in North Carolina. It was also our SRO. He kind of, worked back and forth and, he kept discipline reach on all of us, to where we understood we were going to see him when we went back home that evening in the neighborhood, as well as see him in the hallways in school. We can implement that across the board, so we can see that more. We need to see that more in law enforcement. We need to see that more in our great educators. We have great educators here in South Carolina. We need to give them more resources to continue that mentorship because they definitely need it. It takes a little bit more than just having an excellent heart and wanting to, mentor your students and you want to love them. We want to make sure they have the resources to continue that. But then we want to see it elsewhere. We want to see our small business owners reach back and show our youth how to get involved in business and be able to allocate resources for great causes like what we just talked about in the organizations like what Mr. Derrick is doing. But also in the business banking world, right? We want to see it across the board. We want our Black youth to know how to, if they want to purchase a home, how to, what's important about, maintaining good credit, and then when it comes to activism and organizing, we can't skip that step. We do see a lot of good understanding for our goals for educating our youth, but we also have to make sure that we have the resource available for people who don't want to necessarily go to college, but they want to learn a trade, right? And we got to do a better job of making sure that we market that. Being in the industry that I'm in, I see it all the time, right? We need tradesmen, plumbers, electricians, et cetera, and guys that can make, $75, $85, $95 an hour. And then you go and you talk with some of our youth and they're like, I don't want to be a plumber, right? And they may not even realize, what they have access to if they just put their mind to it, and then it's a matter of options as well. We don't want to force a trade on our youth. We don't want to force college on our youth. We want to force education on what opportunities are available. And then, like I said, if their goal is in activism and organizing and ministry, we have these leaders. We have that in the Black community. So mentorship is vital to make sure that our youth understand what they have access to and what they can accomplish if they put their minds to it. We have good images. We see that on this panel, and personnel who have put in the work. And I'm sure these gentlemen can agree with me, it's the joy that I get out of it. It's not about the money. It's not about any of those things. It's great relationships, and that's key. But it's just that give back. It does something to me. That's what motivates me to be able to come back at it and say, okay, I may have lost that race, right, running for state house. But I met this many people. I learned this much more about the community that I live in Berea and, dabbling in Travelers Rest, et cetera. I was able to accomplish this under the wing of Mr. Kwadjo Campbell, learning from him and, tutelage of Mr. Eli, et cetera. And because of that and those nuggets that were put inside of my basket, I'm able to reach out this much farther, to let other people know. And, so I think mentorship is just really key. We take that image, we turn it into action, and that's how it becomes effective. So
I really appreciate that answer. Derrick, one of the things that you and I have worked with before is expanding our reach into the faith community. You have a strong connection and a very deep respect with spiritual leaders and community leaders in the faith world. Tell me about how that fits into being a Black man today, not only nationally, but specifically here in Greenville.
Yep. So as a person of faith, a person who was reared in the church from about 11 up, because before 11, I wasn't really going to church. But anyways, I have a deep affinity for my spiritual life, but also I understand the importance of having a spiritual guidance, a spiritual leadership, regardless of what your faith is. But here, particularly in Greenville, we have we've been fortunate to build relationships with, folks from all different religions, and it's worked to our advantage, because if you've been at some of the protests and seen some of the protests, we have rabbis, we have Muslims, we have Christians, we have Hindu, we have a plethora of folks who come from different religious groups. But the reason why it's so important is because, I don't know anybody really that I personally, except one person, who doesn't practice some sort of religion. All of us look to, or typically most of us look to a religious person or a religious leader to kind of help us guide our faith. And so knowing that, pastors and preachers in the Christian sector, knowing that pastors and preachers, especially in the Black community, are like one of the single most powerful persons in your life, it's common sense to have those relationships with pastors and preachers and ministers, because they're the ones who are able to communicate to their flock, to their congregation, whatever it is, the message that you're working on. So if you want to communicate to them that there's an election coming up and you want them to, you can't say as a pastor who to support, but you can tell them who you're voting for. So if you want to tell them, that I'm supporting, Eli Valentin, for president, then that's a conversation. And because a lot of times folks will usually look to that pastor who are not politically savvy to say, pastor, who we voting for, or pastor, who we supporting. And not just in the church, but even I at HBCU I worked in an office with older Black ladies and like 60 and up. And we were having a conversation one day about an election. It was in Congressman Clyburn. Everybody knows that Congressman Clyburn is like, he's the man. And so literally one of the ladies, she told me, she said, well, whoever Clyburn endorses, that's who I'm voting for. Like there's no conversation about like anything else. Like whoever Congressman Clyburn says he's endorsing, that's who she voted for. And that's all. And so that's true for a lot of, older folks. They look to, again, like leaders, political leaders and religious leaders to kind of tell them, like, not tell them, but kind of, shoot them in the right direction. And so, yeah.
Thank you for that. And Jonathon, I want to bring that point to you about having those respected figures. You kind of talked about it before. What are some things that you feel like we should be doing to be able to communicate the remedies that are being put forth for COVID? Because we see that COVID is disproportionately affecting communities of colors across the board, but African Americans specifically. What are some things that you think we should be doing as a party, or that the community should be locking arms and doing to be able to get that message out?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And I think that, during the situation, during the pandemic that we're in right now, we as a party, probably don't have much of a greater issue to be trying to help tackle than the pandemic. I mean, we're on a panel right now talking about Black men. And, you just said it, as Black people in this country, we have numbers that are dire in comparison to those of other nationalities. And so it's literally life or death. We talk about all the buzzwords, the pre-existing conditions and underlying conditions, and this pressure being up and this down, and so we know all about that. And so I think as a party, what we need to be doing is we need to be injecting truth, right? So one of the main reasons why I'm a true Democrat is because I believe this party is a party of truth, right? All right. So you look at the national party, you look at the state, local level of the Republican Party. A lot of the reason that there's so much misinformation out there is because folks, they want to deflect from their mismanagement of the pandemic, right? And so it's incumbent upon us to be the injectors of truth, right? And the things that are correct and factual. And so one of the things that I think we can be doing is we could have a panel just on the COVID-19 pandemic, and have those that are in healthcare, have those that are in the faith community that, like Brother Derrick said, and Brother Kwadjo and Javaris, that can help shape those that are in their flock. Because we know that the Black church has always been a bastion, for great things. That's, if you look at Dr. King and all of his cohorts back in that time, just about everything that they did started in the Black church. They whether it was meetings or strategy sessions, they were in the church basement or what have you, or in the pulpit, getting the message out. And so I think that we need to, as a party, be those people that are injecting truth, having experts. I think it was such a shame that Dr. Fauci got relegated to the back burner and ultimately was non-existent for a good period of time during the Trump administration. I mean, it's asinine to me that you have an infectious disease expert that does not have a place at a briefing. That makes no sense. So, we as a party can say, okay, look, we understand that there's some misconceptions, there are some falsehoods, there's some questions out there. We're here to help you figure out what you need to do and what's best, help you figure out what's best for you and your family. And so, we're not going to tell anyone to do this, to do that, but we have that responsibility as the party of truth, as people, as decent human beings that actually care about other people and love our fellow man and woman, to say, because I love you, because we're in this thing together, we're going to provide information that you can rely on. You don't have to worry about, is this information correct? Is this information something that I can, lay my head down at night and know I made the right decision? When you come to GCDP, you're getting, people that care about you, one, and you're getting factual information. And so I think that's where we have to step up there as a party. And I think we do that a lot with some of our other outreach. I know the Young Dems did school supply drive, and Brother Kwadjo's organization, I know, does great things as well. And so I think that when we show people that we care, when it comes time for elections, it's not like we're going and just asking for their vote. They know, hey, this person or this organization has been in my community. They care about me. They truly want to see me thrive. And so it's easier for them then to say, okay, you know what? It's not even a question of if I'm going to vote or who I'm going to vote for. It's just, when do I need to get in line? Where do I need to go?
Very eloquently said, Jonathon. I really appreciate it. And I also feel so much pride when you talk about the Democratic Party, because it exudes from you. You embody it, the best of us. So thank you for that. Kwadjo, I want to kick it to you. Yeah, go ahead, sir.
I wanted to make a comment on the churches piece. We've got to give our churches the tools to become organizers. Andrew Young, when I first was elected to city council, Andrew Young came to city council to help honor. We hung a portrait of September P. Clark in the city hall chambers, and he came to help dedicate the painting. And so, he pulled me aside. I was newly elected, young. I was like 24 years old, and he gave me some advice. He said, "Young brother, if you really want to become effective and have a long time doing this," he said, "you need to get with the Black church." He said, "That is the key to us making some significant moves and changes." And when you look at how much money we spend as a Democratic Party, and I'm going statewide here, right? And some serious elections, right? We just look at our senatorial elections. If we look at our gubernatorial elections, we put an amazing amount of money out there, right? But that money is going into areas of media and or mobilization tactics that don't reach our community. All right. And so we've got to arm these community-based organizations, these churches, right, with tools and resources so that they can become organizers, right? That they understand how to use VAN, right? That they know how to mobilize voters and know what their precincts are, where their churches are located, and that they're familiar with how to organize their volunteers and teach their volunteers how to use the tools and go out into those communities and get that information back to the party and get those communities mobilized. But they need tools to do that, and they need training to do that. And that is something that needs to happen. So I just wanted to add that on to
No, I appreciate that. I was actually going to kick it to you because I also know you do great work with the church, the Black Caucus, but you personally as an operative, because you know the power that they possess and the way that they can cut through the noise, Kwadjo. And I think you said that beautifully the way you said it. They cut through the noise where often the Democratic Party isn't slicing through to get to people. The church is able to keep those folks' attention and speak that truth to power. So I appreciate you jumping in there and adding that piece.
Absolutely.
We're going to just pivot to a quick segment, and then we're going to open it up to questions. So I'm kind of putting the gentleman on the spot here. This segment's going to be called One Thing. And I'm going to ask each of them if they can change one thing about the Black lived experience. what would that be? And I'm going to give them each about a minute. So Derrick, I am putting you on the spot, buddy. You're going first. So one thing you can change about the Black lived experience in Greenville.
It's a great question. One thing I would change about the Black lived experience. So many things to change, but I guess if I had just to say one thing that I would change about the Black lived experience is I would change the
I'll come back to you. It is a hard Kwadjo, I'm going to jump to you, sir. Kwadjo, if you can change one thing in the Black lived experience in Greenville, what would that be?
So first I was going to say, living wage jobs, right? Black men need to be able to take care of our families, et cetera, right? And then I was like, well, man, if you can give a man a fish, man, but if you teach a man the fish, so if I could change one thing about the Black life experience, it would be to go back to a mentality in our community where education was first and foremost. You didn't play with that. The whole community supported that. It was reinforced in every aspect of it. You were held accountable from auntie to neighbor to the boys on the block, as it relates to education. If I can change one thing, I think I'm gonna go with that.
Excellent. Mr. Howard.
So, I think, I'm sorry, I got to pull on that. It was one thing. I was actually in a group recently. There's a group on Facebook I encourage everybody to join. It's about Black businesses in Greenville, Black business owners. And one of the conversations, I think it was Pastor Lenny Gaines, I know you guys might know him, was talking about was, being dependent, holding our Black people accountable, our Black business owners. It's one thing that I've noticed that I want to see better here in our community is the accountability. My father tells me, so many contracts and everything now when you want your grass cut, even just, it's just like 6-page agreement. You say, back in the day, we used to shake our hand. You would shake the man's hand and that was your word. And your grass was going to be cut. It was going to be done right. Your guy was going to be there. He was going to be dependable, etc. I want to try to change the face of how people think that a Black business owner may not be as dependable, right, or as trustworthy. I want to bring that back. I want the Black man to be the image of accountability. So that way, when we offer our services, we're not asking you to support our businesses and you ask for discounts, et cetera. We're asking you to support our business and hire us because we know we're going to do a great job. So I think for me, if it's something that I can change, and I don't know if this quite answers your question, it would be that bringing that accountability back to the forefront of what we offer as Black men.
That's a great answer. I really appreciate that perspective. Jonathon?
Yeah. I think one thing that I would change about the Black lived experience in Greenville, I would just say, and like everyone else, this is a loaded question, but I would probably say our interconnectedness and our collaboration. I think that, and I'm not saying that I want Greenville to be like any other place, but when you think about your Atlantas and your Charlestons even, and I know that every place has different factions and cliques and whatnot, but I think in Greenville, and I think Derrick will probably be able to speak to this, and as well as the other panelists as well. But just being from here, all your life, I think you've grown up, and you know that at the end of the day, we all have good intentions, but sometimes that cliquish behavior gets in the way of advancing our progress as a whole. And I think that we could do a lot better, and that's on our community. So I'm not, we don't need anyone else to help with that. We just have to, be better at collaboration together. And no, we're not going to always agree on everything. That's what makes us all unique, and that's what makes us special. But I think as a people, we can come together and be a little bit better on that. And I would just like to say two more things too. I can't remember, somebody mentioned, but something that somebody mentioned earlier made me think about, there are two ways primarily that you exert your power, or you show approval or disapproval, for the most part, and that's with your money and with your vote, right? And I think that in Greenville, I think Brother Javaris was alluding to it, and Brother Kwadjo as well, that we not only have to support our Black entrepreneurs and business owners, but we have to help them, and like you said, Brother Javaris, hold them accountable, but then help them when they're lacking. It's one thing to receive bad service, and I'm a huge person on customer service. I've been involved in customer service all my life in some way, shape, or form, and so I understand that that's very important. But I'm gonna hold you accountable, but I'm gonna help you as well. I'm gonna share my thoughts with you if I feel like I've had a bad experience. Hey, I would improve this, or hey, have you ever thought about this? Instead of, oh, well, they got my order wrong, so I'm not going back over there, and I'm gonna tell 5 other people don't go over there. Let's try to improve, because it's all about sustainability. Because I don't want any of us to fail, right? I don't want anybody to drop off, and so we need each other, and so that's where the collaboration piece comes in. And so I think that when we use our voice and our vote, like Brother Kwadjo said earlier, and then when we use the economic piece, like Brother Javaris said earlier, then that's how we can advance ourselves as a people. And so that would be what I would say that I wish we could change.
Thank you. And Derrick, I want to come back to you about that one thing.
Yeah, I've had time to think, and now I've got 21 things that I want to ramble. but I'll just say one. But I want to follow up to Jonathan's point, Brother Sweeney's point, and also Kwadjo and Brother Howard's point about supporting Black businesses. That's like that should be a no-brainer to Black folks, that we've got to support our Black businesses, and we've got to make sure that they have a sustainable model, and that model is us supporting them, not only patronizing them, but going on social media and tagging them and posting them like we do all the other businesses that we do, that we talk about. But for me, the one thing I would say is that we have got to start living in our truth. I think that we've been taught so long that we've got a code switch, that we've got to think a certain way or talk a certain way or be a certain way when we're among different communities. And and literally I just got this not too long ago, but when I was in Texas, I was code switching left and right, because I got to make sure I'm saying the right thing and looking the right way. And then I was having a conversation one day with one of my mentors, and he was like, "Why are you code switching?" He was like, just be who you are, and people will adjust. And since then, I've been who I've to the best of my ability, I've tried to live in my truth and walk in my, and to be comfortable in my skin. And so, because we're told you gotta think twice as hard, and you gotta be twice as good, and you gotta do all this extra stuff. And in reality, and this is just my opinion, I feel like we already do more than enough to that we don't have to do anything extra. Just the fact that we show up in the room a lot of times, that's it, that's enough. And so I think that we need to encourage ourselves, number one, but also encourage those around us more and more, to be who you are, be who God created you to be. And, don't let anybody deter you from that reality. But, and the last thing I'll say is that we've got to get to a point, when Jonathan mentioned this earlier, it takes a village to raise a child. We've got to get back to that African proverb, but also we've got to start trusting each other again, because there is almost no trust in the Black community, and there's a lot of reasons behind that, but we've got to sit down and have serious conversations and intentional conversations about how we start to rebuild that trust factor. Because if we don't have trust, what good is it to support a Black business, or what good is it to do any of this stuff if we don't have some level of trust among each other?
Derrick, that was beautiful, and I really appreciate the fact that you thought about that, because that walking in your truth, we should all be doing that. But I think when you have 400 plus years of a narrative that's telling you you're less than and you're not good enough and you're never going to be equal, I think we see ourselves as diminished and not whole. And I really love the way that you said that, because the more we unnaturally release ourselves, we're shining a light on someone else and allowing that person. So by you sharing that, Derrick, you're allowing someone else to live in their truth. So that was really beautiful. I really appreciate you sharing that. We have some amazing questions. And Derrick, I want to start with you, actually. This is from Whitney Wright, who's no longer on the call, but is just one of the best members of the Democratic Party. She's running and reconstituting our Democrats Care program, which was formerly known as the Huddle, but also is integral in what Kwadjo and Javaris and their entire leadership team at the Black Caucus is doing. So even though you're not on the call, Whitney, you are beloved and loved, and we want to thank you. And Derrick, her question is this: as a Black woman, I'm aware of our devotion to the Black community at large, but how can we best support Black men? What do Black men need from us, in their own words?
Yes, give me that question. That's a loaded question, and I'm gonna lean on my brothers also to chime in and help me out with this. But honestly, I think Black women they have done it, and they continue to do it every single day. Like they support us like nobody else does. They support us when we don't support them. They believe in our dreams. They believe in our thoughts. They a lot of times are more excited about the things that we want to do than we are. And so I think just continuing in that vein of supporting us and continuing to encourage us as Black men, also standing in the gap and being that mother figure or that big sister to younger Black boys, and even to older Black folks, Black men who may not be walking down the right path. Because a lot of times it takes that one Black woman to say, boy, get your ass off the street, or get your whatever, for them to finally realize, like, wait a minute, I'm doing this all wrong. And so just continuing to show that love and that genuine support and continue to pour into us. I think that's the best thing that they could do.
I think he answered the question beautifully.
I agree.
Derrick, I just love you. You made everyone so proud. They're like, Derrick took it. We're moving on to that one. But I want to thank you for the question. Chris Grace asked some great questions. And Kwadjo, I want to kick this one and start it to you. But the panelists, feel free to jump in. This is a dialogue I want all of you to be a part of. Chris is in healthcare, and he's amazed at the institutional racism that he sees in healthcare, as well as the incredibly low percentage of Black physicians in the country. How do you fare with healthcare, and do you have any recommendations? Kwadjo, I'll start with you, and thank you for the question, Chris.
Yeah, I think these institutions need to take seriously invest in recruiting. One of the ideas that I sit on a committee with the Charleston County School District, where we're looking at their minority procurement policies and working to improve them. One of the recommendations is that we're going to ask them to do, and this is something that hospitals can do, sheriff departments can do, is to dedicate 1% of their budget to recruitment, diversity and inclusion. And so we had, he lost, but we had the former sheriff Al Cannon was going to introduce that 1% idea to Charleston County for his sheriff's department, and that money was going to be used to send people to HBCUs and to high schools in African American communities to, begin recruiting people for these careers, right? And introducing them to the multiple opportunities within the sheriff's department and in law enforcement, the multiple opportunities that are in healthcare. But these institutions have to invest in those recruitment efforts.
Well, I appreciate that. Would anyone else like to jump in on that?
I like to chime in just really quick. I want to, I do want to comment on the last one, Brother Quarrels. I think this is important. You hit a nail on the head, and so I'm not taking away from nothing you said. I just want to add to it. I want to say for the ladies, continue to lead. Also, I'm gonna tell you, I was just as inspired when Kamala became our first Black African American vice president as I was when Barack Obama became our first president. And I think it ties into, kind of, the point of what Brother Campbell just spoke on. That leadership in healthcare, being led by a woman is awesome. But just that leadership, being able to give back and educate. I think Brother Sweeney talked about it, about the healthcare disparities in our communities and how COVID is showing that, how it's leveling out that playing field as far as we're understanding that COVID doesn't care about your color. It doesn't care about what neighborhood you're from, except what's happening is how healthcare responds to what area you're in, when you're getting vaccinations, and also misinformation and how it has a stronghold on the Black community right now. And that's something that we've talked about on the caucus, making sure that we improve our education, as someone else just said also, to talk about how the vaccinations, we want to get our people safe. So I think in healthcare, we're surrounded by educational institutions that focus in healthcare. And I love seeing African-American students involved in healthcare. And now I just want to see that match with, as he said, other institutions and programs giving back and helping to fight those disparities that we've been facing. This is nothing new. We've seen, disparities in healthcare in the Black communities for a long time. But right now, if not never a better time, it's time for us to make sure that the resources are there to fix that. So.
Thank you, Javaris. And Jonathon, our wonderful voter protection chair, Jean Marie, asked a very similar question, but just about the legal field. She said something that the South Carolina Bar is focusing on is trying to increase diversity and inclusion in the legal field, in part by letting folks know at an early age that the law is a career that is available to all and for them. Do y'all have any recommendations on how to reach more young Black men in South Carolina to make sure that they know not only that the law is an option, but it's an option for them? And thank you, Jean Marie, for the great question.
Yeah, I do think that's a great question. It goes back to something that we were discussing earlier about those institutions where Black folks have always gathered and have always come together to learn and to coalesce. And, those institutions would be, the church, obviously. It would be your community centers. It would be your civic organizations, whether it be the NAACP or, or what have you. Those the fraternities and sororities, those things would be the places that I think that they should start. Obviously, the school would be the primary location of that, because you want to reach people while they're young, children while they're young. And so, I think that having folks come in for career day, having a Black lawyer come in there and talk to folks, having a Black law enforcement officer come in there and talk to the classroom, having clerks of court, and, all of these things, because it's not just about being an attorney, or it's not just about being a police officer, but, like Jean Marie said, there's so many different things that go into law and the legal field. And so I think those places would be where you would start. And I do want to jump back to one other thing, if I can, real quick. As Brother Javaris was just finishing up his point, he was talking about the misinformation and whatnot. And I know when you and I talked offline, a week ago or so, Eli, we talked about, we were talking about education, and I think I brought up something that, was kind of interesting. But I will say that I'm definitely not one of those people that believes that, I guess I should say I understand that some people say, hey, college is not for everybody, or secondary education is not for everybody. And I would agree with that. But I think that, when it comes to, and I can just speak from my experience, when it comes to things like misinformation, right, not just around COVID-19, but even these wild, ludicrous conspiracy theories that that we're still seeing now, that talked about in the news, whether it be QAnon or all this other, ridiculous mess. I can say for me, college, and I think Brother Derrick spoke to this point a little bit earlier, it's not necessarily the classes or the curriculum that you had, because a lot of us can look back on classes that we had and say, I probably don't really use that particular information. But it's the fact that you were taught to critically think, right? You were taught to challenge what you heard, so that's why for me it's always so crazy how folks can get wrapped up in, like this conspiracy and all this kind of stuff, because I'm like, there's no way that you can believe this stuff is true, or you can just, easily take in something and not challenge it. I was always taught to challenge, information that you receive, even from folks that go back and do your own research, because you want to know that what you're taking in is correct information. And so I think that at least exposure to some type of secondary, education is good. And I don't know how you merge that in, because I think the trades and all of that are important too. And I think that, there are folks that are doing just as well, if not better, at least on a financial standpoint, that they went straight into trades or whatever. But I think that, just the critical thinking piece, I think is important. And so, I think that we need to keep that top of mind as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jonathon, for that. We're going to ask this last question, and I'm going to start with Derrick, but I want to open it up to anyone. And the question is from Philip Hodge. Thank you, Philip, for the question. Does the panel think that the entanglement of African-American men in the justice system at a disproportionate rate and the removal of their right to vote leads to further disenfranchisement? And then a follow-up is there any move on the local or state level to restore voting rights to felons? I'll answer that one. I just worked in it for voter protection, so we did that. You should get on Trav Robertson and call him to keep the voter protection unit. But Derrick, I will kick it to you so that you can answer that question as well.
Thanks for the question, Dr. Hodge, and thank you, Eli, for the work that you've done on making sure that folks who have been incarcerated can have their voting rights restored. So during the Senate election in Georgia, I had a conversation with right after the election with some folks in Atlanta about this very topic, and about how the first thing that happens to folks when they go to jail is they're stripped of their voting rights, or they go to prison, or when they get a felony, they're stripped of their voting rights. And that's because, like, the powers that be understand the power of one vote and how effective one vote can be, and how transformational one vote can be. A prime example of that is back in 2016, there was a sheriff race in Greenville, and we didn't have any Democrats running in this race. It was a Republican, and it was a Republican primary. And so, because we didn't have a Democrat, we had to, I don't say we had to, but we thought we'd do ourselves a favor and kind of and get involved in that race, and to kind of help decide who would be the sheriff. And so we started to meet with different candidates, and the sheriff at the time, Steve Loftus, who had been the sheriff for 20 plus years, he didn't want to meet with us. And he told us that that Democrats don't vote in Republican primaries, and that even if we did, it wouldn't make a difference. And, that was the downfall, because when he told us that, we went out and we recruited folks and we voted, and he lost the election. And not only did he lose, he only lost by like 500 votes, and that 500 was like the 500 Democrats or Black folks who decided to get in this race. And a lot of those folks were folks who had records, folks who have been incarcerated, folks who have been on probation or parole, that wanted to have a say-so in who the highest ranking law enforcement official was in Greenville County. And so I think that it's incumbent upon us to continue to advocate for folks to have their voting rights restored. I know that in the state of Kentucky, the governor there, on his 12th day in office, it was such a priority for him that he went ahead and restored voting rights to everybody that had been incarcerated, whether they were on probation or parole or not. And they have a system now to where if folks are in prison, when they come out, like they get a piece of paper saying their voting rights have been restored, and they can do anything from voting to running for office. And I know in South Carolina, they can vote, but they can't run for office until a certain amount of time. And so we got to make sure that we have that if you're going to, have a conversation about equity and inclusion, that it has to be across the board, and that you can't say, oh, I'll let you vote, but you can't run for office, because it makes no sense to me.
No, that's great. And I do want to let you know, Philip, please join us. We're going to be doing the same move in the Greenville County. We're getting the purge list, those that might have been purged. Normally, those skew 70 to 80% people of color. And in Greenville, that's probably 70 to 80% African American. So people that have just been kicked off the rolls for none of their own. And also, we're going to attack restoring the voting rights for felons as a project in the larger GCDP in partnership with the great work that Kwadjo and his whole team is doing there. But panelists, anyone want to jump in and add anything to what Derrick said on that question?
Eli, I don't have anything on that question. I do. Hopefully, we have just a brief amount of time. I have, as I alluded to earlier, I have several family members that are on the call, and a beautiful, brilliant, educated cousin Claire. She would like to make a suggestion. If you just give a few minutes at some point before we wrap up.
Absolutely. Well, I just wanted to just kind of go quickly across the panel and do some closing statements. But before that, Laura, if you wouldn't mind unmuting Claire. And Claire, if you'd like to share your suggestion, and then we'll close out, because I want to be as respectful of time as possible. But I know this conversation can go all night, and it should be going all night, because it's a conversation that needs to continue to happen.
Yes, hi everyone. I am thankful that I was able to join this panel discussion and hear all these poignant thoughts and suggestions about how we can improve in the Black community with our young children, as well as adults as well. This was great. I feel like this should go on for a lot longer, but I will make a suggestion to you. So working with the Charleston County School District in our recruitment efforts, one of the things that we do, and I'm not sure if you all do this in Greenville County, but we work with the local colleges with the Call Me Mr. program. So although South Carolina State, Claflin, we work with Claflin, South Carolina State, College of Charleston, and Clemson. And I know Clemson is very close to Greenville. So that Call Me Mr. program is, we try to recruit diversity, but also bringing in Black males, because we know that there is a scarcity among our teaching and our education staff with Black males, seeing Black males in the building. And we've seen our numbers change a little bit in a positive way as we have a lot of these Call Me Misters into the school. And even though some of those Call Me Misters have, we have a whole symposium where they get to tour all these Title I schools where they see the need. They get to interact with the kids. And I think that's helpful for kids to kind of see somebody that looks like them. And having a young teenager, I can tell you that he also says that helps, having a male teacher, period. But then when you see having a Black male teacher or a Black male principal in your school, somebody that looks like you and can relate to some of your concerns, it is a lot, the reward is a lot greater. And I say that because, we don't have time to really talk about that, but the reward is greater. I also think that tapping into our local churches, we do have churches that have reached out who are a part of our Title I school programs. But I also think even in the schools that aren't Title I, those who are perceived to be excellent rated, I feel like those children, we still have Black children, Black and brown children in those schools that are predominantly white and very successful who are still lacking. I've gone to symposiums where I've seen people come in and talk about trades and talk about engineering or talk about the medical field, trying to entice kids to come to them. But I look at those children and they're sitting in the auditoriums, unenthused, not really paying attention. So it's like, how else can we branch out to entice these kids so that they don't feel like I'm only here because I had to be here, because we definitely want to reach these, but I often feel like our kids in these schools that are excellent rated are still getting overlooked. So it's not just the Title I schools, it's also the schools that are doing well in the school district.
I appreciate that, Claire. And I know Kwadjo works really closely with the Call Me Mr. program, and the school that he works with, Legacy, has been really instrumental in that. But we do need to continue to make more outreach and to affect more change at an earlier age to show that representation matters.
Hey, Eli, I just wanted to just chime in. You talk about what Claire's saying, that's the effectiveness. I'm at Hughes Elementary right now, which is a majority school, so I see exactly what Claire is saying. I teach at that school this year. Of course, I teach those kids, right? Because I can relate to them. I could build with them. They build a trust with me, and we can their growth is an example of that, but at Legacy, I was able to recruit a number of Call Me Misters to work at Legacy. And I want to just tell you, we transformed test scores in math. I had in fifth grade, both of the math teachers were Call Me Mister. They were highly recruited by schools all over the place, you know what I mean? And I pulled those brothers to the side and said, hey, we're not Greenville County, we're a charter school. Let me teach you how to negotiate your salary for next year. You're a hot commodity, so that's another thing we got to do as family, you know what I mean? Professionally, we got to coach each other up in certain circles on how to get that bread, but yeah, those Call Me Mr. dudes are serious and they can transform. So yeah, that's a great recruitment tool. I'd love to see more school districts implement that officially, contractually, and the state legislature put resources behind the Call Me Mr. program so that we can get more funding, because, it's just not, they get more money to Teach for America than they do Call Me Mr. You know what I'm saying? And we're way more effective. A lot of Teach America teachers in it for a little bit and be out doing something else. Call Me Mr. teachers, that's their career. That's what they do. They're here for the long haul. So it's a much better investment by the state to invest in the Call Me Mr. program.
It's a life calling. I think that's what you're doing a great job in the Call Me Mr. program. It's a life calling to give back. But I know we are over time, and this conversation will happen some more. We want you guys to continue to stay engaged. I do want to give the panelists a quick time. Jonathon, I'll start with you if you want to wrap up with any quick final thoughts.
Yeah, Eli, again, thanks to you, thanks to Laura, thanks to my fellow panelists, Javaris, Kwadjo, Derrick. Thanks to everyone that joined, especially my family. I can't thank you guys enough. You all support me in everything that I do, so thank you so much. I would just say, to wrap it up, man, I mean, you talk about Black Boy Joy. I mean, this, I'm not gonna lie to you. I used to think that hashtag was kind of corny, but it's really a thing. It's something to see Black men in a positive light, all with a goal in mind of moving our community forward, moving our people forward. And I think that can't be taken lightly, because I think that so many times in media and in other realms, you see the Black man only portrayed in certain ways and certain forms, and you don't see educated, hardworking Black men that want to see their communities better in forms like this. And so I'm just elated to be on the panel with you brothers. I'm elated for the work that we're going to do moving forward, because I think that this is great, but then there's work to be done, and we're all doing work, but of course there's so much more work to be done. And so let's just continue to build and grow, and thanks again for everybody for allowing me to be here and speak to you tonight.
Thank you so much, Jonathon, and thank you for your leadership, not only for me and for making my life easier with the GCDP, but for what you do beyond the community. Derrick, I want to open it up to you for any final thoughts.
Yep. So again, thank you for this invitation. Thank you all for organizing this. This has been a very fruitful conversation. Hope to do it again soon, because I think it's healthy, and I think that it's needed more. And for me, this is therapy. And so I do appreciate it. And on the therapy note, I recommend everybody have a therapist, because whether you have issues, we all have issues, but whether you admit it or not, like, just having a therapist doesn't mean you got issues. It just means that, like that you want to be a better person, and that you have stuff that you want to get off your chest. And so so I highly suggest that folks have therapists. But to Kwadjo's point about making sure that we know how to market ourselves and that we knowing how to negotiate salaries, I think that's a conversation that we have got to have, like, and it's got to be moved up on the totem pole, because I've literally seen situations where two people interview for a job, they both get the job. One person is making 90,000, the other person is making 50,000, and we already know who's making 90, who's making 50, and the person that's making 50 is going to be me. I got more education, I got more experience, and I'm just more qualified, but because of the color of my skin, and that's just the reality of it, like, I'm going to make less. But when you open your mouth and you say no, like, I know how much I know my values. I know my skill sets. I know, forget the education piece. Like, I know the work that I can do. I know the work that I've done. And when you can go in those rooms and have those conversations with folks, then, you know, I had class today. And so my professor, he's an older guy, he's in Mississippi. And he was saying that he never wants to work a job that pays him like his maximum worth, like because he always wants to be able to leave and go to another job to make more money, or to be able to make more money. And so I would just say that we've got to make sure that when we are interviewing for these jobs, and that when they said the salary range is from 70 to 110 me, please, because I know my worth. And so I've literally turned down 3 or 4 jobs because, like, I'm not going to take a job where you're paying me below what I'm worth. And so yeah.
Derrick, thank you so much for joining, and let us know how we as a party and a community can get behind the great work that you're doing and have been doing for such a long time. Mr. Campbell, I'm going to open the floor up to you to wrap it up with any final thoughts that you'd like to say.
I just want to say, just echo what everybody else says. Eli, thank you for the Greenville County Democratic Party for putting this event together and having this important subject on the table. I just want to say I'm ready to work with you guys some more. Let's get to work. As Brother Sweeney said, my only final comment is this: let's get to work. And Brother Sweeney, I know your family is very, very proud of you, brother, as we all are. Yes, sir.
Bless you.
And Mr. Howard, I'm going to end with you this evening.
Awesome. Well, I'll keep it short. Again, thank you to you all, panelists, organizers. Absolutely amazing, informative. I hope to see this continue. I hope that we continue to recruit open minds that want to grow and learn and lock arms with people who want to see improvements in our community. So I'm super excited. I'm thankful for the opportunity, and that's all I got.
Well, thank you. I want to thank our incredible panelists. The vulnerability and the honesty that each of them shared with cannot be understated. It was such an amazing panel for me to experience because the truth that was spoken and the perspective that was shared. So Javaris, Derrick, Kwadjo, and Jonathon, thank you for your time, your wisdom, and your willingness to share your personal story. We all know being a Black man is tough. Greenville County is not making it any easier. I hope that this conversation added insight into the experience that differ from your own, or will challenge you to build a more inclusive and equitable community that we deserve here in Greenville. But most importantly, I hope this conversation cemented the realization that we aren't done confronting the systematic racism and oppression that our African-American brothers and sisters have lived for centuries. As Democrats, we must set the example by recognizing our own biases, because we all have them, and start digging deeper through introspection. Take whatever form that is. For me, that's prayer. For me, that's quiet time, but be introspective. We want to lead us to become better versions of ourselves, which will in turn make Greenville a better place for all. Thank you, participants, for joining, taking time on your second Thursday. I want to thank Laura Haight, who will be packaging this event and sending it out as a replay. We have a wonderful, wonderful team, and I just want to shout out my right hand, Ruth Todd, who is the best teammate and partner I can ask for in this journey. I hope you all stay safe and healthy during this pandemic, And join us next month. We're going to be talking about women in leadership, a conversation about the tremendous legacy of female excellence on the Greenville City Council. Y'all choose to be a light in this world. You never know whose path you're going to illuminate. Take care and have a great evening.